There is a terrifying, steep drop-off between our polite society and the deep violence hiding right beneath its surface. Modern true crime media struggles with an empathy problem. Too many shows get bogged down in the sterile mechanics of police procedurals, or they slide entirely into misery porn, harvesting gruesome details for cheap entertainment. To keep the story simple, the genre usually leans on two exhausted character types: the absolutely flawless angelic victim and the calculating evil genius mastermind who took them away. Hulu's 2024 limited series Under the Bridge tackles the 1997 murder of 14-year-old Rena Verk in the quiet, picturesque suburb of Saanich, British Columbia. The series strips away those tired television conventions. It forces viewers to look past the sensational headline and face a very grim reality. Rena was killed by a catastrophic collective failure of her entire community. When writers turn victims into perfect saints to heighten the tragedy, they actually strip away their humanity. The victim becomes a mere plot device for the detective to solve. Rena existed at a highly complex, isolating crossroads. She was a South Asian, Sikh-descended teenager navigating a predominantly white town, all while living under the strict, isolating rules of her family's Jehovah's Witness faith. Desperate to carve out her own space, she rebelled. She actively tried to shed her family's traditions, instead adopting the tough, aggressive posture of 1990s American gangster rap. She craved acceptance from the local foster girls so intensely that she filed false police reports against her own father just to escape her home. She burned down her safety net to impress a group that actively despised her. Rena could be impulsive, difficult, and intensely frustrating. Highlighting those messy, completely normal teenage flaws only makes the terrifying violence she endured feel infinitely more personal and tragic. The perpetrators were not criminal masterminds. They were the Bic Girls, a local moniker for foster children who bounced around the group homes, named after the lighters because they knew the state viewed them as cheap and disposable. This diagram illustrates how social mimicry filled their psychological void. When the official support system failed, the girls immediately constructed their own hierarchy, mimicking the exaggerated, hyper-violent personas of Los Angeles street gangs and New York mob bosses. That fantasy structure acted as a psychological shield. It allowed powerless, abandoned kids to write themselves into a new narrative where they commanded fear and respect. When the physical violence against Rena ignited, a crowd of teenagers stood around and watched. The sheer volume of inactive witnesses quickly turns a petty teenage rivalry into a horrific, fatal display of the bystander effect. Nobody stepped in. These were ordinary, deeply broken adolescents wielding casual cruelty, operating entirely without a moral anchor to tell them when to stop. The show also dismantles the righteous investigator trope. We follow author Rebecca Godfrey as she embeds herself with the suspects, sharing drugs with them and crossing obvious ethical boundaries. She becomes a stand-in for the writer as predator. It makes the audience ask if she is actually searching for the truth or simply harvesting the trauma of vulnerable kids to process her own grief and sell books. The actual moral weight falls on Cam Bentland, an Indigenous police officer. She must navigate an active investigation entirely hindered. But through Cam, we see the echoes of the 60s scoop, a dark period where Indigenous children were systematically removed from their families. Cam's own displacement perfectly mirrors Rena's deep isolation, ultimately exposing the deeply embedded racial biases within the Canadian justice system. These adult perspectives reveal a grim reality. The institutions built to protect these girls were broken long before the murder, leaving the authorities as nothing more than helpless witnesses to the aftermath. The Craigflower Bridge stands as a literal and psychological liminal trap. Underneath those heavy metal beams, the teenagers operated out of sight, in a dark pocket entirely detached from the rules of civilized society. It was here that a cigarette was crushed out on Rena's forehead. That single burn marked the exact moment petty teenage bullying mutated into a violent, inescapable group ritual. During the subsequent trial, the town scrambled to assign blame to a few bad apples. Locking up the ringleaders was far easier than examining how the community's own neglect helped raise them. A gavel striking wood and a guilty verdict on a piece of paper do not bring a child back. They offer a hollow legal resolution to a family left staring at an empty bedroom. If the true crime genre wants to justify its existence, it needs to stop serving up easy answers. It must force us to look directly at the systemic apathy and everyday cruelty hiding quietly in the shadows of polite society.